Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this very auspicious occasion. I should tell you at the outset, backstage, Mayor Bloomberg was taking credit for the New York City weather and chiding the governor about rainy upstate New York. So we've already had a division of political claims here this morning. I'd like to welcome all of you and ask you to join me now in standing for the entrance of the colors. Now I invite you to join the West Point Band in the singing of the national anthem, and I ask you to remain standing for the invocation by the Reverend Chuck Kramer, rector of St. James Episcopal Church, Franklin Delano Roosevelt's home church in Hyde Park, New York. Ladies and gentlemen, the West Point Band.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, you know that few will remember or who guided this nation, perhaps as no other could, through the tumult of financial depression and war. It is his great service to our country and the world which will never be forgotten. With our words, O Father, we dedicate this park as a memorial to his leadership and vision. Those who visit here will remember, or discover for the first time, 4 freedoms which he articulated to the world, freedoms which he believed were the right of all your children, not just you. So bless our words, Father, but bless even more this good park and the good that it will do. May it be a place of rest and refreshment, of hope and inspiration, today and for generations to come. We humbly ask these things through your everlasting grace and love. Amen.
Thank you, Father. And now I ask you to remain standing as we retire the colors. Everyone be seated, please. We'll hear the voice of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Which we seek to make secure, we look forward to a world founded upon four essential human freedoms. The first is freedom of speech and expression everywhere in the world. The second is freedom of every person to worship God in his own way everywhere in the world. The third is freedom from want, which translated into world terms means economic understandings which will secure to every nation a healthy, peacetime life for its inhabitants everywhere in the world. The fourth is freedom from fear, which translated into world terms means a worldwide reduction of armaments to such a point and in such a thorough fashion that no nation will be in a position to commit an act of physical aggression against any neighbor anywhere in the world. That is no vision of a distant millennium. It is a definite basis for a kind of world attainable in our own time and generation.
We're so privileged to be joined here today, not just by the distinguished guests that you see arrayed behind me, but also we're honored by the presence of Vice Admiral Robin Brown, who's Chief of Naval Reserve, Commander Naval Operations, whose presence helps us recall, of course, President Roosevelt's very personal and long-time historic role as the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, his personal affection for the sea, and his lifelong affection for everything Navy. And speaking of the Navy, we also want to give thanks to the Navy Operational Support Center Color Guard of New York City for presenting the colors today. In addition, crew members of the USS Franklin and Eleanor are here representing the officers and crew of that vessel, which at the moment is on duty at sea. Lieutenant General David H. Huntoon, Jr., Superintendent of West Point, the nation's oldest military academy, which is a proud neighbor, obviously, of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's home and Presidential Library at Hyde Park, also is here, and we're very grateful to have his presence. And part of today's program, obviously an important part of it, the historic United States Military Academy Band from West Point, under the direction of Lieutenant Colonel Jim Keene. It's the oldest active band in the Army. They've served the Academy and citizens of this country since 1817. They performed for all of the Roosevelt family on numerous occasions, including the inaugurations of President Roosevelt and the Hyde Park funeral service for President Roosevelt as well, so it is all the more fitting that they join us today. We also welcome in the first row here the former governor of the state of New York, Mario Cuomo, Mathilda, who has a dual title now. She was the First Lady, now the First Mother of the state of New York. The Honorable David Dinkins, the former mayor of New York and early supporter of this project. Mr. Mayor, welcome. Also in the front row, Dr. and Nancy Kissinger. Dr. Kissinger's special regard for FDR goes long back to his arrival of his family as refugees in 1938. And Dr. Kissinger began his great public service to our country by enlisting in the United States Wartime Army with President Roosevelt as his first commander-in-chief and returning to his native country in the uniform of his native and his now adopted country. We also have with us today the children of Louis Kahn, the brilliant architect and creator of this stunning Four Freedoms Park. His daughters Sue Ann Kahn and Alexander Ting, his son Nathaniel Kahn, whose award-winning documentary about his father reminded the world that Kahn's last work, this memorial, remained to be built. And a moment of personal privilege, if you will, the title of that documentary is My Architect. It is one of the most stunning works that I have ever been witness to, both as a journalist and as someone who admires the ability of a son to describe the work and the legacy of his father, so I highly recommend it to all of you. Nathaniel's mother, Harriet Pattison, who worked closely with Louis Kahn to develop the magnificent landscape of this park, is also here. We owe them all a round of applause. And of course, we're so pleased to have with us and honored members of the Roosevelt family, including the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt, for whom this is another chapter in their long and distinguished history of service to this country. Would all members of the Roosevelt family please stand? In so many ways, whatever their political affiliation, their faith, the country of origin, people who lived during the presidencies of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and those who came later are all the children of this president in so many ways. His wartime leadership, his vision for this country, his unalloyed passion about patriotism and public service. And I count myself as one of those. We gather today during what we think of as troubled times to honor a fellow New Yorker, a man of distinguished family heritage, a public servant to the depths of his being, a great patriot, and a president for the ages. As he prepared to begin his third term as president, these were his troubled times. We were still emerging from the Great Depression. Nazi Germany was on the march through much of Europe and taking dead aim at Great Britain. Japan was spreading its imperial ambitions throughout Asia. Our military was undermanned and ill-equipped. Franklin Delano Roosevelt told the Congress and the American people that the security of this country was threatened as it never had been from without, from external threats. And he chose to rally his fellow citizens and the world with a bold statement of the fundamental principles of free men and free women everywhere: freedom of speech and expression, freedom of worship, freedom from want, a healthy peacetime life, freedom from fear. 4 freedoms that on that day and forevermore define the aspirations and rights of all, as he put it, everywhere in the world. At a time when we are all wondering about our own resolve as American citizens, when too many ideas that are small and divide us suffocate the big, bold ideas that unite us, this was a very big idea, 4 freedoms. And FDR dictated them word for word to an aide in his study, leaning back in a swivel chair, staring at the ceiling, and speaking softly. And now, all these years later, he speaks to us again. And for his eloquence and his wisdom, his vision and courage, we gather to not just honor the 4 freedoms, but to recommit ourselves to their place in the lives of everyone, everywhere in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my now great privilege to introduce to you a man who is truly a political child of FDR. It's a great honor to introduce former President of the United States, now a great citizen of the world, William Jefferson Clinton of Hope, Arkansas.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The program is long, so I will try to be brief. I thank Governor Cuomo and Mayor Bloomberg for their support of this project and for governing each in their own way in the spirit of Franklin Roosevelt. I thank Ambassador Vanden Heuvel for devoting so much of his life and passion to keeping the legacy of Franklin Roosevelt alive and relevant to us today. I thank all of the people who were introduced and those who were not introduced, all of whom have made their contributions to America, many inspired by President Roosevelt. And a special thanks to the members of the Roosevelt family who are here, and to one who is not, Eleanor, who made sure that the four freedoms were included in the preamble to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. I know that because, as all of you famously learned when I served as president, my wife, now the Secretary of State, was known to commune with Eleanor on a regular basis. And so she called me last night on her way home from Peru to remind me to say that Eleanor had talked to her and reminded her that I should say that. This day has been a long time coming, and many people brought it about, but I do want to acknowledge one more person. I want to thank Fred Eichner, one of the wisest, most generous people I have ever known, for making sure this dream did not die and keeping it alive while the rest of you were able to do what needed to be done to bring it to fruition. I was honored to speak at the dedication of the Franklin Roosevelt Memorial on the banks of the Tidal Basin close to the Jefferson Memorial in 1997. A different century, a country in different circumstances. The Cold War won, unemployment low, the economy booming, the budget about to be in surplus for the first time in decades. The future looked so bright then that it was tempting to wonder if the two freedoms that Franklin Roosevelt personally added to the First Amendment protections for speech and religion, freedom from fear and freedom from want, could also be relegated to history as having been fully achieved. It was not the case in 1941 when the President first pronounced them in the State of the Union. It was not the case in 1945 at the end of the war. And it is no longer the case today. But the dream is still the right dream for America. In this park that Louis Kahn designed but didn't live to see, I'm reminded of another speech President Roosevelt wrote, but sadly did not live to deliver. 4 years after the Four Freedoms speech at the Little White House in Warm Springs, in celebration of Thomas Jefferson's birthday, April 13th, FDR wrote that we as Americans do not choose to deny our responsibility, nor do we intend to abandon our determination that within the lives of our children and our children's children, there will not be a third world war. Looking beyond imminent victory in World War II, he committed the nation to a course of action that has truly reshaped our world. As we look out on this bright new day, we are close to the United Nations, which he more than any other soul created, and which has contributed to avoiding that third world war. We are also close to ground zero, which reminds us that we are not yet free from fear. And we are also close to the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island, which reminds us that for 67 years since 1945, people still come here from all over the world seeking the four freedoms. In 1997, at the other Roosevelt Memorial, I said our mission was to prepare America for a time to come. An America still inspired by FDR's enduring ideals and ideas. 15 years later, we have gained a lot of freedom in civil rights and women's rights, in the ability of the strong countries around the world to minimize human suffering and lift prosperity and health care, and to minimize the cost of human tragedy. But we have again been tested by fear, and too many of our neighbors here at home still struggle to find freedom from want. This park should always remind us that those dreams are worth pursuing. Perhaps, ironically, it is altogether fitting that this day was delayed until a time when we knew that we could never take the four freedoms for granted. In a time when we too would have to decide whether to build a country that benefits the many and not just the few. A time when we too would have to shoulder our share of the responsibility for freeing people from fear and from want. When we would have to remind ourselves that the freedom of religion requires mutual respect and not recrimination from those who worship differently from us, and requires us to insist that they accord us the same rights. This is a wonderful day for our country, a day to remember that the words Franklin Roosevelt spoke so long ago still mean something today, partly because we need bold, persistent experimentation, partly because we need innovation, and mostly because we need never to forget that we will never be free of these fears until we are one community of shared prosperity, shared responsibilities, and a shared sense of citizenship. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. As a journalist, I often try to imagine what it would have been like for so many of our great leaders of the past if they had lived on into the 21st century. I like to think that FDR, sitting in his study in Hyde Park, would look down on the city of New York with a great sense of admiration for the mayor of New York, a man who did not need to step into the public arena, but did so, and brought with him not just enthusiasm, but intelligence and an unconventional way of governing this very large city. Moreover, I also think that the former president would have admired Mike Bloomberg for going for a third term. Ladies and gentlemen, the mayor of the city of New York.
Tom, thank you. Good morning, everyone. It really is an honor to be part of this ceremony, but particularly to have President Clinton and Governor Andrew Cuomo join us, as well as some other people from the city. Former Mayor Dinkins is here, as Tom mentioned, and we have the Speaker of the City Council, Christine Quinn, the Borough President of Manhattan, Scott Stringer, and the City Councilwoman, Jessica Lappin. And if there are others back there, I apologize. We have our local district attorney, too, Cy Vance, and his predecessor, Bob Morgenthau. So thank you, all of you. They do deserve a round of applause. Today, we dedicate this park to New York's single greatest contribution to the preservation of our republic and the peace of our world, and I think that's a fair way to describe Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It will stand forever as a monument to a man who brought us through the Great Depression and brought us victory over great evil, and it will stand forever as a monument to the inspired principles that guided him and that still animate our national purpose. The four freedoms celebrated here are much more than a symbol of a past that most of us do not remember. They form a challenge to the present that is ours to shape. Because so long as extremists continue to engage in terrorist acts, So long as bigotry leads people to hide their true selves or deny their true ambitions, we must continue to seek freedom from fear everywhere in the world. So long as poverty keeps families from buying food and medicine, we must continue to seek freedom from want everywhere in the world. So long as religious believers are persecuted or attacked for building congregations in their own communities, we must continue to seek freedom of worship everywhere in the world. And so long as artists and activists, publishers and politicians are silenced or censored, we must continue to seek freedom of expression everywhere in the world. It is my hope that all of those who visit this new park will be inspired to take up the challenge that President Roosevelt left for us of securing and protecting these four freedoms. It is a mission that lies at the heart of our city's history. From our earliest days, New York has been built by those who fought to defend and extend our freedoms. And this beautiful, graceful, and peaceful memorial and park honors their legacy as well. It reflects the values and aspirations of our city and of our country. And I think there's no more fitting home for it than here in the shadow of the United Nations that FDR conceived, a stone throw away from the Navy Yard he once oversaw, on an island that once housed the poor that he protected and the infirm whose pain he understood, looking out on the sea he loved and the city that he did so much to build. This park is destined to be a national treasure. Louis Kahn's inspired design and, Mr. Ambassador, your great leadership made this possible. And thanks to the generous support and the support of the city, the state, and federal governments, it has come to life, I think, in spectacular fashion. This park will make Roosevelt Island a destination for millions of New Yorkers and visitors. And it opening signals the beginning of a new era for the island. We're here pleased to have President of Cornell University, President David Skorton, with us today. The applied science campus that he is helping build will rise just north of here, from where we stand now, to the Edward I. Koch Bridge, and it will honor FDR's vision of the future. Back in November 1944, with World War II still raging, President Roosevelt wrote that the scientific advances made during the war years, quote, should be used in the days of peace ahead for the improvement of the national health, the creation of new enterprises bringing new jobs, and the betterment of the national standard of living. New frontiers of the mind are before us, and if they are pioneered with the same vision, boldness, and drive with which we have waged this war, we can create a fuller and more fruitful employment and a fuller and more fruitful life, unquote. FDR understood that science could be harnessed not only to win the war, but also to achieve our true objective, securing the four freedoms everywhere in the world. This park and this monument will provide a serene, inspiring place for a new generation of citizens and scientists who can together allow us to fulfill FDR's great and achievable vision. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Staten Island's world-famous PS-22 Chorus. They have performed on national television with many of the world's great stars, and I hope this occasion will be one that they will someday tell their children and grandchildren about.
Ladies and gentlemen, one more round of applause, please, for the chorus from PS 22 in Staten Island. You may have noticed in your program that we had Audra McDonald scheduled to sing here today. She's one of the great troopers and one of the most gifted artists in American entertainment. Unfortunately, she called at 6 this morning heartbroken because she's not feeling well and was unable to attend. So I know that she's here in spirit, and certainly she would so have admired the musical interlude provided by the students of PS 22. As they exit the stage, it is now my privilege to introduce to you a man who sits in the office once occupied by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, not too far from his home. He represents a second generation of New Yorkers who have run for the office, the highest office in this state. He served in the cabinet of the United States. He was the Attorney General of the state of New York, and he represents a continuation of the family legacy of public service. Ladies and gentlemen, the governor of the great state of New York, now known as the New New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. And let's give Tom Brokaw a round of applause for his generosity today and everything he does. President Bill Clinton, I had the pleasure and the honor of serving in the Clinton administration. I like to say I went down in the Clinton transition, and I didn't come back until the last day of the Clinton administration. And it was a great experience for me and a great time for those of us who believe in government, because the Clinton administration showed that government works and that government can make a difference, and we made this country a better country. But I'm sure you agree with me, it's a special treat for all of us as New Yorkers to have Bill Clinton in New York as a New Yorker. He could have gone anywhere on the planet, and he chose New York, Bill Clinton. To my friend and our great mayor, Mayor Bloomberg, Tom is right. The mayor and I had a quick conversation before we were walking on the stage, and the mayor said that it was supposed to rain in the city, but he sent the rain upstate. He said, and he pointed in that general direction. You know, upstate starts just north of the Bronx, if you know that. I said, yes, you sent the rain upstate. It will now fill the reservoirs and will sell you the water back through the aqueduct system. And we agreed to that. Mayor Mike Bloomberg, who's doing a great job. Ambassador Bill Vanden Heuvel, who was a juggernaut of determination to make this project happen. Sally Menard, who worked on this project tirelessly. All the people who worked to make this a reality. Let's give them a round of applause. My other colleagues in government, Speaker Christine Quinn is here, Mayor David Dinkins is here, Jessica Lappin, who worked very hard to make this a reality today, members of the Roosevelt family, and as a point of personal privilege, former Governor Mario Cuomo and former First Lady and mother of the current governor, which I like actually better than former First Lady Matilda Cuomo. This memorial is also a tribute to Louis Kahn and his vision that he could design a memorial. It could lay dormant for years and years and be picked up and be just as vital and current as the day he drew it. It's a tribute to the entire Kahn family who's here with us today, and let's give them a round of applause. You heard from President Clinton eloquently describing FDR's For Freedom speech and the lasting legacy that FDR has left on this country, how in many ways FDR established this country as a beacon worldwide for progressive democracy. But it is also fitting that this beautiful memorial sits at the entrance to this great state, because the state of New York and FDR have a powerful connection, New York was the incubator and the demonstrator of FDR's philosophy and vision. It was growing up in New York that FDR was exposed to the challenges of urban America and the powerful writings of Jacob Riis opening his eyes to the plight of the other half. It was growing up in New York where FDR experienced firsthand the potential of the new immigrants who were coming to this country and how they could be an asset to this country. Living on his farm in Dutchess County, he learned about agriculture, but he also learned about the problems of his neighbors in rural communities. It was in New York where he watched the Erie Canal develop the state of New York and open the nation's West for having FDR realize the power of government public works. As a young leader in New York, Roosevelt learned of the pressing social issues: the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire and the plight of men and women working in factories. He learned of the legacy of Seneca Falls and the growing crusade for equality among women. Al Smith was probably one of Senator Roosevelt's greatest mentors, and Al Smith taught him about the role of activist government and the potential of activist government and the responsibility of government to help those who were less fortunate. FDR then became governor of the great state of New York, and New York became the laboratory of progressive democracy, and FDR was the scientist, creating formulas for a broad range of national problems and social ills. Governor Roosevelt became the first governor of any state to publicly advocate for a pension system for the old age, those in old age, and that later became the Social Security Act. Governor Roosevelt passed the first laws protecting labor unions and workers' rights, and that was the preview of the Wagner Act that created the right to unionize and collectively bargain. It was Governor Roosevelt who supported subsidizing housing for low-income city dwellers, and that was the birthplace of the nation's public housing system. Governor Roosevelt, who was inspired by the Adirondack Park created by TR, learned the value of conservation, and as governor of New York, changed the state constitution to allow the state to purchase additional forest lands solely for conservation purposes. And he hired 10,000 men and women to work on those lands, and that became the precursor to the Civilian Conservation Corps. In sum, FDR believed in government's ability to be a force for good, and he tried to right the wrongs wherever he saw them. FDR made this state a better state, and government was the vehicle for his action. One of FDR's essential directives was that perfecting progressive government is an ongoing journey that must be pursued relentlessly. And I quote, "Progressive government by its very terms must be a living and growing thing. The battle for it is never ending. If we let up for one single moment or for one single year, not merely do we stand still, but we fall back in the march of civilization." Close quote. Today, it is the legacy of this great state to strive to continue that crusade and to build on that progressive tradition. I believe this state's success last year in passing a new law that achieved marriage equality for all New Yorkers, that ended discrimination, and that established a new civil right. I believe that marriage equality law followed FDR's vision, and New York's passage of that law has now inspired other states to try to pass similar laws, causing New York to finally lead a progressive movement once again. The crusade continues here in the state of New York. It is also a personal honor for me today to follow another great leader in his actions, and that's my father, Governor Mario Cuomo. In 1985, Governor Mario Cuomo re-energized this memorial development. He formed a bipartisan commission at that time with Louis Lefkowitz and with former Mayor Robert Wagner. And the charge of the commission was to assess whether or not the memorial could be viable. And the commission came back and said it could be viable. Then in 1993, the state put in the first dollar to start government's initiation of this project. Now, many governments have helped, the city government has helped, but the effort has primarily been driven by private individuals, private foundations, and private management. Today, I believe it's time that government assumes its responsibility and that we learn from FDR and government assumes leadership. And this great memorial should be a park, and it should be a state park. And I'm pleased to announce my intention to establish this site as a state park, the Franklin D. Roosevelt for Freedom State Park, New York's 214th state park. As a state park, it will be open to the public for all to enjoy as it should be. And it will be a lasting and fitting tribute to New York State's son, Senator, Governor, and President, FDR. Thank you and God bless you.
Thank you so much, Governor. These are the occasions that remind us of who we are as Americans, our common values. As I look out across this audience, I see the humble and the powerful. I see families who have been here for hundreds of years and those who arrived just recently, the wealthy and those who are simply trying to make it day to day. We're all bound together by the American dream and by the constant presence of helicopters wherever you are in New York as well. But I want to introduce to you now someone who is so representative of the American dream and representative of this immigrant nation. Salvador Barragan is a Mexican immigrant who lives in Rochester, New York. He was 14 years old when he wrote a letter to Bill Vanden Heuvel, having heard Bill discuss on the Charlie Rose Show the four freedoms of FDR. These are the closing lines of Salvador's letter. Freedom is worth fighting for, isn't it? Being an immigrant gives me that extra push to succeed, and I don't take the freedoms I have for granted. I believe that FDR's Four Freedoms Park will be a great way to remind my generation of the freedoms that they have and how hard our forefathers had to fight to get them. Freedom is worth fighting for, Salvador. I'd like you to stand so that we can acknowledge you and for your family being with us here today. Of course, it is our good friend Bill Vanden Heuvel, Ambassador Vanden Heuvel, who did appear on Charlie Rose, and a man who shares the political philosophy of FDR, his heritage as well. He truly has been the godfather for this project. It has been a long and sometimes difficult struggle, but what a magnificent end that we celebrate here today, and who better to speak to us about that than Bill Vanden Heuvel. Bill?
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Thank you. Mr. President, Governor Cuomo, Mayor Bloomberg, Reverend Kramer, Tom Brokaw, Admiral Brown, General Huntoon, and David Scorton, President of Cornell. How happy we are to welcome you as the neighbor to the north. And what you will be creating is certainly going to be one of the great scientific institutions of the country. So welcome, neighbor. Governor Cuomo, Mayor Bloomberg, I want to thank the men and women, first of all, who built this park. I want to thank the construction workers who placed 261,000 cobblestones, who moved the 36-ton granite blocks, who created and placed a colossal bust of Franklin Delano Roosevelt behind me, the work of his friend and great sculptor Joe Davison, which will always be the commanding center of this beautiful site. And I want to thank Lois Sher-Dubin, who made nature live as a landscape architect during these years of creation. I want to thank the companies, the unions, the architects, for everyone involved. This was more than a job. It became a privilege for each of us. Not without exasperation, not without frustration, not without disappointment. But on those days, I remembered the wit and wisdom of Franklin Roosevelt when he said, "When you get to the end of your rope, tie a knot and hang on." And we did. The address to Congress that history knows as the Fourth Freedom Speech was given by Franklin Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States, on January 6, 1941. In it, the President asked not only his countrymen, but also the people of the world to understand that the terrible scourge of war that was upon us could only be justified if our children's children, if we in faith and honor, determined to create a different world to assure the peace of humankind. The world at that time, beset by war, oppressed by Nazi domination, brutalized by racist thugs, was a world where every tenet of democracy was threatened and ridiculed. President Roosevelt's power as a speaker was to present profound ideas in simple language. A great Republican newspaper editor, William Allen White, from Emporia, Kansas, upon hearing the speech declared, "The four freedoms marked the beginning of a new era for the world. A great occasion, a great cause, a great man have been united." President Roosevelt made clear that the four freedoms were no vision of a distant millennium. They are, he said, the definite basis for what kind of world attainable in our own time and generation. This park will be a constant reminder of that challenge. Tomorrow, the Secretary General of the United Nations and the ambassadors from many countries and the international public service who make the UN an indispensable part of world governance will come here also to celebrate the memory of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who more than any single person helped found the United Nations. On September 24, 1973, at the invitation of Nelson Rockefeller, our governor, and John Lindsay, our mayor, 500 guests gathered on this island. They included Bob Morgenthau. They included Jay Kriegel. They included Arthur Schlesinger and Bill Walton and Ed Lowe. They included Walter Curley and Vernon Jordan and David Dinkins. The island was renamed for President Roosevelt on that day, and it was announced that the park would be constructed on the southern tip of the island and that Louis Kahn was going to be its architect. And so began the journey that reaches the milestone of the park's completion today. Like many great public enterprises, there were unanticipated obstacles and difficulties that overcame the best of intention. And then 1974 came the perfect storm. Nelson Rockefeller became President of the United States, Vice President of the United States. Louis Kahn, having completed his work, died unexpectedly of a heart attack, and New York City was on the verge of bankruptcy. The question remained, would FDR be memorialized properly in his own state, and could the last work of this great architect be built? In 2005, the Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt Institute encouraged us to try. In 2005, we had a wonderful exhibit at Peter Cooper Union that Gina Pollara curated and that Reed and Jane Rumid helped finance and bring it to the attention of the nation. The effort began and never faltered. And let these names be recorded as indispensable to our effort. Mrs. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Jr., Sally Menard, Gina Pollara, Kathy Sloan, and let the conscience and integrity of what we've tried to do be in the sure hands of Jim Polchek and Eugene Cohn and Jack Reynolds. The first major donor in 2006 was Arthur Ross, a great philanthropist, and Janet Ross carried forward his intent and Arthur's memory will always be with us. The Alphawood Foundation of Chicago and its founder, Fred Eichner, became our lead donor with a gift that assured our credibility, and Fred, we will always be grateful to you for that. The Reed Foundation, representing Jane and Reed Rubin's intense interest in this project over the years. The Stavros Niarchos Foundation with Andreas Dracopoulos, who was its president. The Peter J. Sharp Foundation with Dan Lufkin and Norman Peck and Joe Duffy. And Sir Evelyn and Lady Lynn Rothschild made gifts of great consequence. And the personal involvement and encouragement of Dr. Henry Kissinger, whose family came as refugees to America in 1938, is a gift that I will always cherish. Mayor Michael Bloomberg made the city a full partner, and Governor Andrew Cuomo made sure that we reached the finish line. Speaker Christine Quinn and Roosevelt Island's remarkable representative Jessica Lappin led the city council in giving crucial support. Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, Borough President Scott Stringer, thank you so much, Mr. President, and Assemblyman Micah Kellner were with us on every step of the way. Construction began on March 29th, 2010, and as the magnificence of the kind and design emerged, it became clear that this stunningly beautiful work would be an enduring gift to New York and the nation. Adding to its luster, the Four Freedoms Park will also be digitally equipped in a pioneering effort to tell the history of the Roosevelt era from the Great Depression through World War II. This digital resource will teach and inspire generations to come, and we're grateful to the Stavros Niarchos Foundation, who understood and supported this pioneering educational challenge. The Four Freedoms Park will help our children's children understand why Winston Churchill described Franklin Roosevelt as the greatest man he had ever known. They will understand President Roosevelt's life, which Winston Churchill said must be regarded as one of the commanding events of human history. President Roosevelt was the voice of the people of the United States during the most difficult crises of the 20th century. He led America out of the despair of the Great Depression. He led us to victory in World War II. 4 times he was elected President of the United States, and by temperament and talent, by energy and instinct, Franklin Roosevelt was ready for the challenges that confronted him. He was a breath of fresh air in our political life, so vital, so confident, optimistic, so warm, good-humored. He was also a man of incomparable personal courage. At the age of 39, he was stricken with infantile paralysis. He would never walk again or be able to stand alone unassisted. The pain of his struggle is itself painful to recall. Learning to move again, to stand, to rely upon the physical support of others, and never giving in to despair, to self-pity or discouragement. He gave that courage to his country in its time of greatest need. He replaced fear with faith, transforming our government into an active instrument of social justice. It was a time when heroes were possible, when idealism was admired, when public service was the highest calling. It was also a time when Adolf Hitler laid claim to the future. President Roosevelt's response was to make America the arsenal of democracy. He was commander-in-chief of the greatest military force in human history. He crafted the victorious alliance that won the war. He was the father of the nuclear age. He guided the blueprint for the world that was to follow, the vision of the United Nations, the commitment to collective security, the determination to end colonialism, the economic plan for a prosperous world. This is the legacy of Franklin Roosevelt that we remember today. But it is not worldly power and grandeur that cause us to remember Franklin Roosevelt. It is the cause of human freedom and social justice to which he gave so much of his life. The Four Freedoms Park will be an eternal reminder for all of us and those who inherit our places as to what America's dream really means. Thank you for being here on this historic day. Let the children everywhere hear the bells of freedom. Let our leaders be unafraid in the quest for peace and social justice. Come, my friends. Come, all of us. Come to this place and find again the inspiration, the courage, and the strength. It is not too late to seek a newer world, and I invite you to find it here. Thank you.
Dare I say that's a message that resonates with all of us, whatever our political registration, whatever our standing in life. And so, Bill Vanden Heuvel, we are grateful for your participation and your leadership, and we say thank you for all that you have done for this. Now we're ready to cut the ribbon, but before we do, Bill wanted to remind everyone that beautiful as it is, this lawn, much of the memorial is behind us here. So after the ribbon is cut, please feel free to enjoy refreshments and explore this newest of the New York State park system. Our young FDR docents are on hand to help launch the new FDR for Freedom's digital resource. The life and legacy of Franklin D. Roosevelt are now at your fingertips as well. But now we'd like to ask President Clinton, Governor Cuomo, Mayor Bloomberg, and Reverend Kramer to step forward for the ceremonial ribbon cutting, and joining them are Mrs. Franklin Roosevelt Jr. and Miss Eleanor Roosevelt, who will do the honors as they come forward. Our two young ribbon bearers are Ambassador Vanden Heuvel's granddaughter, Lila Vanden Heuvel Coley, and Ben Polera, whose mother has been working on this project for most of his life. As these children stretch the ribbon across the stage, let us all remember the four freedoms and what they mean for future generations. Freedom of speech and expression, the best defense against the corruption of democracy. Freedom of worship, our shield against the forces of bigotry, intolerance, and fanaticism. Freedom from want, a commitment to erase hunger, poverty, and pestilence from the earth. Freedom from fear, a freedom dependent on governments dedicated to peaceful solutions of conflict and our leadership in the family of nations. Children have done their duty. We presume that someone has brought a pair of scissors, so if we could have a drum roll, please. And now all together, join us in saying, "Let freedoms ring." 1, 2, 3.